Don't pee on me. Hey Sarah, can you hear me okay?
John, can you hear us? He's saying he can't.
I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect.
His voice is pretty low, though.
Yeah,
We need to increase
oh.
that. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the February 23rd, 2023 special budget meeting. Please stand for a flag salute. The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mosher,
Here.
Ms. Duncan? Here. Mr. Yestad,
Here.
Mr. Pike,
Present.
and Ms. Carlson.
Here.
Mayor Eisenbais and Mr. Christensen are absent this evening.
Are there any agenda or correspondence or agenda changes? Okay. Seeing none. We are now at persons to be heard for public participation on any item off the agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes per individual. Is there any public comment for items off the agenda? Please come forward and state your first and last name for the record. Also note that this is not a time for back and forth dialogue with the public. We just want to thank you for your comments and give you a chance to speak. push that button, please?
I'm not used to these things yet. Although you'd think I would be by now. Anyway, I just wanted make a couple of comments. I assume that you're aware that the Seawalk was not supported by the Sitka tribe, last I heard. So that's one of my issues, because it's gonna be like, people are gonna be looking in my windows and invading my privacy, plus hurting the herring spawning areas that are right there. I saw them spawn last year. So just saying that that's one thing that I brought before you before, and nobody seemed to really take it to heart too much, but maybe they did and I just didn't know it. Other than that, there was an article in the paper tonight about Lisa Murkowski saying that we're losing population. I know of 3 families right now that are planning to move out of Sitka because it costs too much to live here. And I think that you need to be aware that I'm a single person in a single household, and I'm being charged the same as a family of 5 or 6 for my utility bills. I don't argue with the electric part, but as far as it comes down to the sewer and water and all the rest of that stuff, I don't use what any 4 or 5 member family would ever use. And so I think that either needs to be graduated rates, or you have to really look at what you're doing, because it's running people out of town. They're saying they can't afford to live here anymore. And the groceries are outrageous. Gas is $5.13, and my little Honda Fit took $50 to fill up the other day. So I'm just saying is that, you have to think about when you do these rate increases, and I do understand, but you don't have to give. I was an employee for the city for a long time, and I didn't get raises for a long time either. So let's just say it's not as simple and as straightforward as what you'd like it to think it might be. So I know you're going to have discussions about all this stuff, and I may speak again at the end of your discussion. Thank you.
Good evening, Richard Ween. My God, we had couple of beautiful days here, which makes Sitka absolutely indescribably beautiful. A waxing crescent moon with actually some planets out there. So got some nice photos. It's important to know that just some quick headlines. I do support the original language of Roald Dahl's books. And it's time that the language police be incarcerated. This is Roald Dahl, who wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Willy Wonka and etc. And they're looking, his heirs and his publishing company are changing the language. And so I stand with the Oompa Loompas. I stand with Augustus Gloop. And I'm sure they stand with me. Another thing is that the McDonald's is now introducing plant-based chicken McNuggets. Have they no shame? That's why we should bring in something else, because pretty soon it'll be McCrickets that they'll be serving us. But I forgot to bring my rose-colored glasses tonight, so I may be facing reality a bit. And the best laid plans of mice and men ere gone agee, often go astray. And by that I mean is that the economy, no matter what you do here or think about things here in Sitka, the economy may have some very drastic effects. Some of the important things that you need to know. And my question when I read these things, how is it going to affect Sitka? Well, I don't know whether you know who Neil Kashkari is. He's head of the Minneapolis Fed, and they're looking at Shrinking the economy. Well, what does that mean? If the Fed is looking to shrink the economy, it means increased interest rates. It means lots of other things. But most importantly, how will that affect Sitka? Did you know that credit card debt is up? Disposable income over in 2022 is down $1 trillion. Savings plummeted $1.6 trillion, which is the worst since 2009. And I'm sure I'm the oldest one here. I'm the only one who remembers 2008, where they had the crash, et cetera. The core CPI has risen 32 months straight. And how is this going to affect Sitka? And I want you to think about these things, especially as you deal with real wages. And real wages have not increased. They may have the basic, which looks like it's increased, but real wages have not. So think about all this tonight. Thank you.
Anyone else for persons to be heard? Okay, seeing none. Move on to new business. Tonight's discussion, we're starting with item A, is the discussion of the FY 2024 municipal budget with a focus on enterprise funds. Assembly action may be taken. John Leach, our municipal administrator, is attending by Zoom and will be available to answer any questions. And with that, I'll hand it over to Melissa Haley.
All right, John, did you want to kick anything off here or just have me move forward?
If you're okay with just moving forward, I'll only speak if absolutely necessary, just to avoid the technology glitches here.
All right, sounds good. All right, so today I want to just kind of go through the process and the goals that we have around setting our rates. I also want to discuss any changes from what we discussed last year. I think, as you know, where a lot of budgeting is making guesses, and some of our guesses were spot on last year and some weren't. So we'll kind of go over that and then just kind of go over some of the assumptions that are behind our rate recommendations. And the main purpose of this meeting is really to seek guidance from the Assembly on setting rates, and that so that we can be looking at a budget for our enterprise funds that includes a rate structure that is based on the rates that we settle on tonight. So we have some issues that affect across the board all of our funds, and we have mostly it's our utilities, but then we have to add on harbors. So if I say utilities, I'm not excluding harbors, but they're not exactly a utility. So we have inflation. It's slowing, but it's still not down to where everyone wants it to be. The construction costs are still high. I think we're starting to sound like a broken record on the fact that construction costs are higher than our operating. The increases are, just staffing in general. We're having a hard time with that. We have. Last year, we were in the process of a number of master plans. Those have been largely wrapped up. So we have some really good new data that has gone in. But every time we do one of these, there's also, some new things will come up that require a little more investigation. So we have some of that for a few of the funds, which we'll talk about when we get to those funds. And then we have some master planning and condition assessments that are underway, and that's particularly for the harbors. We're really looking at stepping back and doing the assessment a little differently, where from the outset, we're not just asking, when does this need to be replaced, but what are some of our options other than full replacement? We still have the potential for grant funding out there. There's definitely some opportunities. I think in some areas, we're starting to see more opportunities that were last year. Some of those opportunities were less defined. In some cases, they're more defined now. That doesn't always mean good news for Sitka. We're kind of in a niche where we're not quite disadvantaged and not quite rural enough to be eligible for a lot of the funding sources out there. And then, we always have the challenges. If we are able to secure grant funding, then we're tied into all of the federal provisions, which can make our projects more expensive and more complicated. We're also dealing with some outside mandated additions to our infrastructure. We're pretty much complete with our secondary water filtration plant. We have recently determined that there will be a requirement for effluent disinfection from our wastewater treatment plant. That was, kind of an issue that was coming up this time last year, but it was not solidified enough for us to put it in our numbers. That has since, it's going to happen. We always have our FERC requirements, and then we have the requirement to compact our solid waste prior to shipping it off island. So these are, a number of very expensive unfunded mandates that we're having to deal with. I think our other, big issue is just the balance between financing our projects with working capital and with debt. It's certainly a challenge to find that right level. So in terms of the process that we do internally and with you, what we start out doing is we sit down as a team with staff, so everyone involved with the funds. We sit down and we look at the long-term fiscal models. So we update them with actuals from the prior year and, make any updates that we have to our capital plan, and then look at the impact of rates. So particularly, we're looking at our levels of working capital, our debt levels, and any outside restrictions that we might have, such as bond covenants. The last year, we presented different scenarios to the assembly, which generally, if we do a higher rate increase at the beginning, earlier, future year increases are lower. And so we kind of presented different options last year, and the assembly selected one. So this year, what we're presenting for every fund is what was presented as the FY24 rate increase under the scenario that the assembly selected last year. Now, things have changed, and in some cases, I think we're comfortable going forward with the rate increases for FY24. But I think looking forward, there's likely to be changes in some cases. I think the wastewater is a good example where we have a very significant project that was unanticipated last year that is now in the works, and we're going to have to fund that. We can get away with a year without doing a higher than anticipated rate increase, but it will be eventually coming up. So the assumptions that we're using, these are in our models and in our rate recommendations. We're looking at a 5.4% increase for operating expenses, and then higher than that for construction. And we're assuming that after this year, inflation does continue to go down. I believe we have 4% for FY25, and then leveling out around 3%. The construction costs for capital, we have remaining higher at 10%, and then going to 8% for next year. And just keep in mind that, these two numbers, that's an 18% increase in 2 years. When we're talking about these big capital projects, that adds up very quickly. And so I think one of the other pieces and what this chart shows is that our wages in Sitka are keeping up with inflation, and not in every case. I'm sure there's households where an increase didn't keep up, but in general, any increase that is under 5.4% is actually somewhat of a rate decrease. So again, what we're trying to do is find balance. So we're looking at our debt to equity ratio, how leveraged is the fund? And we have different benchmarks, which haven't been formally adopted, but are kind of a best practice that we keep an eye on. And we're not necessarily going to meet that every single year, but we're looking for a trend that's in the right direction. We're looking for debt service, looking at debt service as a percentage of our operating cash flow. And really that's about making sure that the fund is at a bare minimum generating enough cash to pay its debt, but ideally actually generating a bit more to be able to invest in capital. And then looking for adequate levels of working capital so that we can fund some of our projects with our own funds rather than borrowing. So for the electric fund last year, we had a 4% increase. We proposed a 3% increase in FY24, followed by a 2.5% increase in FY25. The reason we were able to propose what is a lower rate increase, certainly lower than inflation, is that in FY21, we did a great deal of restructuring of our debt. And so we were able to reduce the cost of our debt. And so because we're spending less on that debt, it's helping us generate more working capital. I think the big caveat on this fund is that we really need to work on defining our long-term capital needs. We have a pretty good idea of the next 4 to 5 years, but it's very hard when you're dealing with a fund that's infrastructure lasts 40 to 80 years. You need to be planning for that now so that you're not in a pinch when it comes time to replace some of those. So that is something that we are working toward. We are also underway right now. We have a cost of service study that is really looking at what areas, what are the costs to provide service to different types of customers in Sitka. So it is possible that there's information from that could result in, not just a flat increase across the board where we keep the exact same structure, but actually some structural changes. There are definitely grant opportunities in this fund. And part of that is there's generally match requirements for those grant opportunities. So making sure that we have working capital available if we need that as a match is important. Overall, right now with the limited information we have on our long-term capital, which we have placeholders in there, but they're not well defined. The fund is meeting some of those key metrics I discussed. For each fund, I've kind of put an outline of this. This is a pictorial representation of my giant fiscal model, so I don't have to drown you all in numbers. But some of the important pieces here are the top blue line is our level of working capital. So you can see the spike above fiscal 23. That really has to do with the loan that you just approved at the last assembly meeting. So we're having an influx of working capital there because that's funding that previous phase 1 and kind of opening up some of the existing working capital that had been spent. This also assumes that we move forward with some pretty substantial work on Green Lake. So you can also see that that blue line drops pretty quickly down to, probably about 6 million there in FY26. So that capital is going to be used up pretty quickly, and then it does start to grow from there. But you can see the pale blue bar shows how much working capital the fund is generating each year. And then you see the dark blue bar is the capital outlay. So, again, while it looks like we're generating more than we need, if you look out in FY 27, 28, I think we're very likely missing some projects in there. But the fund is generating working capital, so it's moving in the right direction.
Melissa, would you mind if I ask a question?
Please.
I don't want to get too off track, but this has to do with the electric fund. You mentioned Green Lake, and I've heard some comments from the people in the public concerned. I think there's maybe perhaps a misunderstanding. I think some people think that we're engaging on a project in Green Lake similar to Blue Lake, that expense level. Could you give us a brief understanding of that?
Absolutely. So right now, our first phase of Green Lake, I think, ended up being about $4 million. And we're looking at another 8 to 10. And it's really, this is not making any changes. This is taking and, I'm limited on the detail I have, but it's taking our existing generators and making sure that are now 40 years old and making sure that they're given the TLC they need to keep on going. And then, just doing other things within the plant. So this is nothing like the major renovation and raising of Blue Lake.
Okay, and more of a high cost repair and maintenance for a very expensive piece of equipment.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So are there any other questions on electric or, any guidance?
Got a question with the working capital kind of dipping here with that blue line. And you said a need for working capital to be able to secure grants. Is that potentially problematic looking out next year or the year after? Or what?
It's hard to say because we don't know quite what's out there in terms of the future capital need. Hopefully with the influx of grant opportunities happening now, we'll know sooner rather than later and can actually make some decisions. And some, there are, some, projects in here that if we had a grant opportunity, we might decide we're worth delaying and using the working capital that would be spent on that to be able to leverage the grant opportunity.
Anyone else has any questions or comments, feel free. I'm just going to ask you, Melissa, is this where you want our direction on whether these rate increases are for the electric fund are okay or?
That would be great. And we could also do it where if everyone is okay with it, we just kind of move forward. But if there are any motions to do anything different than what's recommended, then we could do that.
For me, I mean, I don't have any problems with this. I mean, I would like it to be less, who wouldn't? But given the circumstances, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think anything below inflationary rates at this point is a win. Obviously the funds, it's going backwards due to inflation. So I got no problem with it.
Okay, I will move on to the water fund then.
Just a question about last year. Did we basically have the discussion at the end where everything was summarized on the last page to kind of approve? Or did we do it item by item?
I think honestly, I can't remember. I thought we did it item by item, or if
Okay.
someone had a problem with it, we talked about it. So if you have an opinion, feel free to talk about that. We can go back to that, on the electric, just go for it. It's kind of an open.
Okay, I think it's helpful that last page where it talks about overall, what will the increases look like in total? So
Okay.
I don't have anything individually, but when we get to that last page, I think that gives a better idea of what citizens will be facing. So.
Okay. Sounds good.
Oh, you're saying, Crystal, because that's when numbers get put to it, and it's not just percentages? Okay, because that's kind of, thank you.
All right, for the water fund, last year, we were working on an updated master plan, and that's been largely completed. So we were able to incorporate that into our model. There are some big projects that were included that are out further. I think FY 31, 32, that could really impact nearer term rates. But those projects, before we are comfortable that they need to go forward with that, the numbers we get in a master plan are the 50,000 foot level numbers. So they're not exact, but they definitely give us direction. But we're going to do a bit more work there. Right now with the updated plan, the current, and if we exclude, those, and it's two particular projects that we have questions about. The general rate structure that we presented last year is still good. But again, and I think these projects in today's dollars are over $20 million. So that could have a big impact that we certainly wouldn't want to wait until right before they were needed to start addressing. So we'll be working on that over the next year. And that will certainly weigh into, whatever we come to you with next year. And then I think just, again, what drives rates is our capital, but just to note that we are definitely seeing increases to our operating expenses in this fund. And that really has to do with bringing that secondary treatment plant online. Right now, we're seeing significant increases in our utilities. So that's not good for water, good for electric. But we also may be seeing pressure on staffing as they kind of get a feel for how the plant operations go over this next year. So in general, here on this one, because this fund is very actively both water and wastewater, the current structure is to rely quite heavily on debt. So this top darker blue line is the level of debt. And so you can see that really increasing largely by the capital projects that are happening, which is your, I think up there, it looks like kind of a brown bar. And you can see the working capital stays pretty flat around $5 million, which, when you go out 10 years, $5 million is definitely worth less. This is in today's dollars, so it's not projecting out. And then, you can see too that while the fund is generating working capital, it's not generating a lot. So this structure and what we're looking at right now continues to rely heavily on debt. It is very low interest debt through our DEC loans. So any questions on water fund? And again, the rate increase for this year would be 6%. So that is, would be a little bit above the current rate of inflation. So next we have wastewater fund, which, this one mostly is this is each year we seem to have one fund that has all of the bad news, and wastewater gets that honor this year. So last year, while we weren't necessarily budgeting for it, we had hopes that we would see some grant opportunities, and that is really not panning out. The wastewater is just not a fit for at least what's been put out there so far. As with water, we do have a master plan that's been updated and incorporated into our fiscal model. The other piece of bad news here is the one I already mentioned, the requirement for the effluent disinfection system. So right now, I think we have about $7.7 million for that, and that needs to happen pretty much right away. So this isn't even one that we got to plan for a number of years and, kind of slowly prepare for. So the other thing that we will be including in our budget this year is the request approval to apply for $7 million for the effluent disinfection system and $2.5 million for the rehabilitation of the Lake and Lincoln lift station. So that one was already planned. The effluent disinfection was unplanned. As I said, we're proposing sticking with the rates we discussed last year. This is one where the rates will have to be higher next year to deal with the added cost.
Hey, Melissa, for the public that's listening, can you give a brief encapsulation of the unfunded mandate, like what organization is asking for or requiring it, et cetera?
I believe it's the EPA.
Okay.
So it's, I don't know if we don't have anyone here. I believe that it has to do with our, we have a permit that allows us to discharge our waste, and to keep that permit, it's required that we, now it will be required that we disinfect whatever is being discharged. So that's my unexpert rendition. So we can try and get you some more concrete information on that.
That's fine. I just know a lot of people probably listen to this meeting and it's reported on the press, so a little bit of information helps people.
Question on that. That'll be just a one-time fee there. It wouldn't increase operational expenses in the long run.
I think it's too soon to say. It may well have an increase, whether it's, electric, additional electricity being used or, additional staff time. I don't know. And I don't think we have enough information yet to be able to put a number there. So for wastewater, again, this is one that, we're seeing a significant amount of debt. And we're also in this one, and I'm sorry, I didn't keep my colors consistent, but our capital outlay on this one is the lighter green bar. So you can see we've got a number of significant capital projects in the near future. Our working capital, you almost can't see because it's so low, that line there. So this is really, we're generating enough money to pay for our debt. And we're really not generating additional working capital. You can also see that our, with the current rate structure that we have here, the debt to equity ratio, which you want to keep under 1.2, starting in FY '25, exceeds that. And then our debt service as a percentage of net cash flow is, our ideal is going to be, at least 1.25, higher than 1.25. 1 is enough that we're covering our debt service, so we certainly don't want to go below that. We don't go below that here, but we definitely go below the 1.25. So any questions on wastewater?
You said the working capital is hard to see. Is that like 1 million with the units on the side change a little bit between the graphs? So is it?
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, it's definitely, dropping down significantly to the low millions there.
The low million, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now we're on to solid waste. So again, this fund, especially for those of you who are not so familiar, this one is really different than our other funds because what drives the rates for solid waste are not, high infrastructure replacement costs. So this one is much more tied to the rate of inflation because most of the expenses are contractual. And that includes our off-island shipping. It includes our, pickup contract. So this one is definitely a bit different. We last year had a 7.5% increase and proposed a 6.75% increase for FY '24, along with a 4% increase for scrapyard and transfer station drop-offs. We don't know, the compactor is going to be installed, I believe, in short order, early this spring. And, so that'll go into operation here and we'll have a good number of months next year to see what the impact of that is on our shipping costs and also to see what the cost of operating that compactor will be. We have identified the need for a fairly significant investment in our biosolid landfill. So that will be coming forward as part of the capital plan and the capital appropriation for this year with the solid waste fund. We're also, we've been seeing some very good revenue from our recycled scrap metal, but that is starting to go down. So that has a negative impact on the fund's revenue. We're still in roughly the same kind of time frame for seeing the fund having positive working capital with the rate structure we're looking at. But again, it is pretty dependent on inflation. If we saw a spike in inflation, our rates would have to also have that spike. So. Oh, and this one, because it's not capital driven, I don't have that same chart. So are there any questions about solid waste?
I guess kind of going back to the Bear Task Force info, like is this the fund that would pay for bear-proof cans if we choose to go that route, or would that come out of the general fund?
I think it could happen whichever way the assembly
Okay.
decides. It could certainly be something subsidized from the general fund. But
Okay, gotcha.
So for the Harbor Fund, first, I want to say that we were not able to get the order quite right this year again. And so while I've spoken to the Port and Harbor Commission, they have not had a chance to formally have the rates on their agenda and make their decision. So today, I'm not planning to have the assembly weigh in one way or another until we hear from the Port and Harbor Commission. I am going to go forward because I have to start getting the revenue drafted. I'm going to go forward with the 7.3% that was part of our scenario last year. And, we're also this year, we're generally, and what I've talked to the Port and Harbor Commission about is we've got our condition assessment underway. And my general recommendation is that we don't want to fall too far behind. And so kind of staying the course is I believe, a wise move. But we will come back, and when we have further budget discussions, we'll be sure to let you know how the Port and Harbor Commission weighed in on this.
When will that happen? Do we know?
Yeah, sorry. That'll be March 8th, I believe.
And so we'll discuss this more when we talk about enterprise funds on March 23rd. So we'll have their feedback by that meeting. So this brings us kind of to that bottom line impact. And what we have here is that it's the same representative utility bill that we have been looking at for the past few years. It has a non heat pump electric heat, home heated with electric heat, looking at the average use for the winter rates and the average use for the summer rates. Just to kind of give you the idea of, what a household that heats with electricity, what their bills would look like during the summer and during the winter. And that brings us, so our monthly increase with all of the rates that we discussed for FY24 for the winter months for a household like this would be 26.28. The seasonal increase, so the total for the season would be 157.68. And then for the summer, the average monthly increase would be 25.38, with the season increase of 152.28, with a grand total of 309.96 for the year. So that would be the financial impact on a home that uses electricity like this.
So this is kind of free form. If anybody has any comments or questions, please feel free.
Just a question about the utility subsidy program. I know that we increased that. What are we providing as far as assistance this year, and how many people are benefiting from that?
I believe it's about 165 this year. So it's 165 people approved. So it's very close to the levels we were at last year. And it's $100 a month. So that was, the subsidy was raised starting in July. So we have that, and we have a transfer from the general fund budget for FY24 to keep it funded at that level.
What is the total that we set aside for that? What are we putting into the budget for that?
We're putting in 198,000. And we always have to put enough in to make sure we have enough to approve the next year. So there's some extra sitting in there, but.
So I guess I'll say my opinions on this. Thought a lot about it. Obviously, I'm going to say yes to this as proposed. We'll see how other members feel. But increasing the rates has never been something I've wanted to do. The first year I was on the assembly, we pushed for a break and we gave people a 1-year break. But then I had some people help me learn, and I learned that, over time, we have to continue to try to keep up. We're not keeping up with inflation, but try to keep these funds healthy so that we can continue to build capital, so we can fix this infrastructure. So I'm going to approve this as is. I feel like, based on the information you provided us, this is well thought out and well planned to the best of our ability. We obviously can't predict the future, as in that increase from the EPA. There's absolutely nothing we could have done to prepare for that. And it's unfortunate that we don't get funding for that, but it is what it is. So for me, I'm okay with this. If anyone else has any other comments, please feel free.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to increase rates on anyone. But, it comes down to, I mean, it sounds a little simplistic, but there's maintenance necessary on every piece of infrastructure that we use, whether it be solid waste or water, wastewater, whatever. And I think it requires an investment. And I think the city has been reliant on the state for quite a while to try and fill in the gaps on this. And, I think the state's not going to be there for us, and it is part of what we need to kind of go towards. So I'm not, jumping up and down and excited about this. But, I do believe in investing in our future and investing in our infrastructure to keep it maintained so that we don't end up having to come to the tax rate payers at some point and really raise their rates. So I don't think this is fun, but looking at it, it looks like we're below inflation overall. So.
Yeah, I'm right on the same page as Tim and Kevin here. Obviously, it's nothing I want to do. Our wastewater, yeah, we're getting put in a bad scenario with new regulations. So there's not a lot we can do there. I have some real concerns about our water. We have some infrastructure that is starting to fail, and that's going to take some pretty big capital expenditures to fix it. And so I think we need to start preparing for that. And the only way to prepare for it is doing what we're doing with our rates, which is still barely, honestly, it's under inflation. So as much as I don't want to see the rates go up, it's kind of just, it's the times right now, and we got to keep up.
Just making sure that I understand and repeating it back. So we did the 3-year projections last year. We kind of held firm to year 2, which is where we're at. I did hear that wastewater is projected to be 8.25%, but that one's going to have to be higher than the 8.25. But otherwise, if we're looking at year 3 of these other funds, if they remain stable, they should go down next year, kind of in line with what we had approved last year, hoping that we would increase it in year 2. And then in year 3, we would have a little bit of a reprieve. And of course, things can change, but that's kind of where we're at if we're following that model.
Yes, and I think there's certainly, for example, electric fund, that one, I would not be at all surprised as we firm up the capital needs. If we can't stay at 2.5%, we're also, those projections showed inflation flattening out as well. So there's definitely some in assumptions going forward that I think will impact next year's, what we guessed last year for 2 years out. So.
And then I appreciate when Port and Harbors can weigh in on the harbor fund. That's always helpful. So I'm glad you'll come back with that for the next time that we discuss utilities. That'll be good feedback for us to have. Thanks for all your work.
Thank you. I did one thing I meant to point out on this, the increase, the year to year average increase of the bill is 4.8% averaged out over the summer and winter. So So that does fall a little bit under inflation.
Does anyone else have any other comments or questions regarding the enterprise funds?
I'd like to discuss, and hopefully we can all do this, a bit about the outlook for the wastewater and how that debt ratio is kind of coming towards us. I know, I don't think changing that 8.5% this year is a good thing. It's the highest increase we have on the books here. It's what it has to be, needs to be. But for the future, and this one was the one, wastewater was the one that had the lowest grant funding potential or qualifications here. So are there any other options, choices, brainstormings that's been done for this, or is it gonna probably be a rate increase in the future we're looking at?
So it's likely to be, in running different scenarios, it's likely that, rather than, being able to start to bring the rate increases down after this year. So for this year, what we're recommending is going with the 8.5%. But next year, what we had recommended will likely have to go higher. And we're not giving up on grants, and certainly when I think we all feel pretty compelled to try hard when someone else is telling us we have to do something to see if we can find a way to get other funding. But we also, this is one we can't lose our permit. So we don't have the luxury of not moving forward. So we have to move forward right now, assuming that we're not going to get anything. But that doesn't mean that we're done trying. So, it's possible we could come back with good news. I'm not very optimistic about that. But likely we're going to have a period of higher sustained increases for wastewater so that we can get those numbers where they should be.
I think everyone's done with comments on this. So we'll close out that agenda item. It's almost the top of the hour. And so let's take a break and we'll hit item B when we get back. So we're just waiting on one assembly member. When he gets back, we'll start back up again. Okay, everyone seated and ready to begin. So we'll move on to item B. This is a discussion direction of the fiscal year 2024 municipal budget. If needed, or as it relates to the general fund and any other funds, assembly action may be taken. Crystal has 2 items for consideration. I would like to ask though, before she starts, basically going to give you the floor. If you could let us know, because we're going to possibly be making decisions or what have you. This is for the general fund. Do you have an idea right now as it is, what our bottom line is?
Yes, so the general fund budget should be coming out tomorrow, but we are still doing kind of final review, final tweaks. When I left the office this evening, we were at a surplus of about $28,000. So it's, pretty tight, but positive at the moment.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, Crystal has 2 items. They're and just we'll take them one at a time. If you want to go ahead and introduce and everything, you have the floor.
Yeah, the first item that was listed in the packet is the Hitkisani project. And there is somebody in our audience, the executive director for the nonprofit organization. If he could come up, they had an annual meeting this past winter, and I know it was a busy evening, so I think he could just bring us up to speed, the people that were unable to attend. So
Yeah.
Andrew, if you want to come up, take a couple of minutes to kind of introduce the nonprofit. We've certainly funded it previously at those requests, but if you could just kind of give us an update, I think that would help us kick things off.
Yeah, you want to just hit the red button, introduce your name and everything, and welcome.
Thank you. Andrew Hinton from the Sitka Homeless Coalition, Deputy Mayor Mosher in the Assembly. I wanted to use this as an opportunity to update the city on the Sitka Homeless Coalition, our project, as well as the importance of this municipal support. Our mission, simply stated, is that we strive to provide safe and warm shelter to those in need. To meet this mission, the Sitka Homeless Coalition is taking construction of permanent supportive housing forward with the Hitkisani project. The Hitkisani project, which is Klingit for little houses, will consist of 13 14 by 16 tiny homes, one of which will be a caretaker cabin. The amenities included in these will be a bed, a kitchenette, a small bathroom, as well as electric heating. In addition to this, we plan to build a community center, which will serve as a space for ongoing supportive services at the site, staff offices, as well as an overflow area for people in need of temporary emergency shelter. We've made a tremendous amount of progress in the last few months. A few weeks ago, the Alaska Mental Health Trust Board of Trustees voted unanimously to grant the Sitka Homeless Coalition a 30-year below market rate lease on the parcel of land at the end of Jarvis Street. In addition to this, in December, we received confirmation of funding in the form of a CDS grant, our Congressionally Directed Spending Grant, our largest singular source of revenue for the capital project. We're actively working with HUD to fulfill the procurement requirements necessary in order to receive those funds. And we expect that disbursement of these funds will commence as early as summer of this year. In January, we also signed a contract with an architectural firm based out of Juneau, Northwind Architects, who are working with us to serve as our prime consultants and get to the finish line. And in late in 2022, we signed a contract with a CPA firm in Juneau that's providing us capacity in terms of financing and grant management. There's been a tremendous amount of community support for this project. In both of our last two fundraising campaigns, we've well exceeded our fundraising goals, largely thanks to the hundreds of individual small dollar contributions that we've received from Sitkans. And a tremendous number of local organizations and agencies have collaborated in order to make this project possible. This project is supported financially or via in-kind support by the Sitka Tribe of Alaska, Search, the Alaska Mental Health Trust, White Elephant, the Sitka Legacy Foundation, SAFE, SOS Lifeline, SAIL, and so on. To speak a little bit more about the ask, I'd like to underscore that support for permanent housing for Sitka's chronically homeless population is absolutely within the city's best financial interest. Neglecting to address homelessness in our community places strain on public infrastructure and ensures that larger sustained financial burden on the public as a result of overuse of costly public services. The Department of Housing and Urban Development cites results from the Housing First projects as having improved physical and behavioral health outcomes and reduced use of crisis services such as emergency departments, hospitals, and jails. The Community Preventative Services Task Force, which is a task force that was created by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, finds economic benefits exceed the intervention cost for permanent supportive housing with Housing First programs in the United States. In fact, their systematic reviews find a societal cost savings of $1.44 for every dollar invested in Housing First programs. These studies reported economic benefits associated with averted healthcare costs, averted emergency housing, averted judicial and police services, averted welfare and disability transfers, as well as increased employment income. And finally, I wanted to use my time to stress that this upfront support is not unlike what other communities have done to support addressing homelessness around Alaska. For instance, the city and borough of Juneau granted the Juneau Housing First Collaborative $1.2 million for construction of phase 1 of the Forget Me Not Manor, a very similar permanent supportive housing project, and $1.5 million for phase 2 of the project. The city of Nome committed $30,000 annually for the Nome Emergency Shelter team and has done so every year since 2009. And I believe for this fiscal year committed $35,000 as a line item. The city of Bethel sold an existing city building, appraised at over $2 million at the time and $4 million after renovation, to the Bethel Winter House for $1 to provide a permanent location for their operations. In addition, the Bethel Winter House receives roughly $60,000 each year from the city in the form of their quarterly nonprofit grant applications. And in Ketchikan, the city council allocated $125,000 to the First City Homeless Services to address issues surrounding homelessness. And having this strong municipal support, this municipal contribution, it not only directly contributes to the project and its success, but is also indirectly so valuable to have this expression of municipal support in order to be competitive for future state and federal funding opportunities. Ultimately, Sitka needs adequate resources for its residents experiencing homelessness, and we hope that the city will support us in developing this much needed service for the benefit of Sitkans for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. He is without question an expert on the organization and how it functions, where it's at. So if we have any specific questions, we can certainly call him back up and he can kind of field those. But appreciate it. Thank you so much for giving us that quick overview.
Sounds good. If I could just say one thing real quick before, just procedurally, we were gonna do motions on these two items, but we're not gonna be doing that. We're just gonna be doing this by consensus tonight. So we'll discuss these things and then one by one and just kind of come up with a consensus for now.
And then I could go ahead and take the lead since I submitted this request to kind of justify my line of thinking, and then we can have that discussion. So of course, the Hitkisani project, this has been underway for the last couple of years. We remember those requests came through to us via Gail Young, and it was to do a laundering service and showers, and it's grown from there. So this request is for a financial donation of $50,000 in this upcoming fiscal year. And I have to start, and I'm going to try not be long-winded, but last night after a book club got over, I had to drop by the office to pick something up real quick. So I work over on Searchers Campus. I have an office over there. And as I was driving over there, I saw at Kettleson Memorial, that bench that's outside, there were 3 individuals who were seated there. This was at 8:30-ish in the evening, and I looked at the dashboard and saw that it was 29 degrees outside, which is the temperature as I was driving in. So I can't speak to whether or not those gentlemen were unhoused or not, but my assumption is I'm sitting in this room with my wool coat. I'm such a baby when it comes to lower temperatures, but I try to minimize outside if I don't have to be. Whereas we know some folks can't necessarily do that. So I wanted to start with that example because a lot of times we see housing as not the privilege that it is. And we struggle with that in this community. So just want to take us back to the government where we met with the tribe and they asked us a question at that meeting, and we had a discussion around when you guys are talking about housing, what are you focusing on? And so we kind of read off, there are definitely categories that are really popular. We talk about low income, we talk about affordable housing. We this year approved doing a survey to try to open up land so that people could develop that. We were talking about lot sizes, all of those very popular terms. I think what gets lost in the mix sometimes is the residents here in Sitka who are unhoused due to circumstances. And so just want to remind us, the reason that I felt that this was appropriately is that unanimously we approved the strategic plan this year. And within that, I looked to goal 1.2, which is of course how we did the housing service or the housing study that's going to come out. That's a 2-year project, but it was to develop a plan to improve housing options for all in Sitka. And I wanted to emphasize the all in Sitka and say that I think that is why this project would fall within that. So my fallback is to look at it from a comprehensive approach and recognize that homelessness is a category that's within our strategic plan. I don't think that the city of Sitka has the capacity to take on this type of a project. We heard from other governments throughout Alaska where they give resources to other nonprofits who can carry out those functions. I think that's appropriate. I'm not asking us to expand government by doing this. Our contribution, it would be financial in this upcoming fiscal year to kind of support the efforts that are already underway at the table. And this is actually something that Melissa hit on earlier, is that we've discussed the Marine Haul Out, Marine Service Center, Seaplane Base, and all we talk about are how cost estimates are going through the roof. This is their construction year. So they have secured and they will continue to secure funding. The reason I think it's appropriate for us to step forward is we know what it is to struggle with those increasing costs. And so while they are securing that funding on their own as a nonprofit, they have the large federal allocation that came through from Murkowski. I think that this 50,000 would go a long way to support them when this is their highest expenditure year. So they are basically constructing at this point in time, and we know what construction costs look like at the moment. So just to talk a little bit about our co-equal government structure here in Sitka, the tribe contributions, I think Andrew did a nice job of kind of summing it up. They have provided financial resources from the start, as well as their in-kind staffing support. So the difference between the tribe and the city is that they have an entire social services department. Within that, they have somebody who's a transient housing coordinator who can assist tribal citizens who are struggling here in the community of Sitka. We don't have that. And that's okay. I look to other governments and I see that they don't function as a social services. I'm not asking to bring on FTEs and create a department, but I do think the way that we can lend support is going to look differently just based off of our structure. So that's why the 50,000 felt appropriate. And then the other cities approach, again, Andrew did a fantastic job. It's a Google search. What is Ketchikan doing? What is Juneau doing? How does Anchorage tackle this topic? What about in Nome, Bethel? Trying to find those regions that have 29-degree temperatures like us, some of them are colder, and they have unhoused folks in their community that they're concerned about. So we included that as part of the document that I put together. I did the resource form because I want to uphold the fact that John uses these to kind of suss out what will move forward. But then I also put together a second document, really trying to make it a concise presentation. So you'll find that information in detail on these two documents. And then just to kind of wrap up, looking at the FY23 cycle when it came to the nonprofit awards. So I went back to the September meeting because I was curious who were the other agencies that were applying. We spoke very highly of everybody who submitted an application, and we funded every application that came to us. The largest went to Sitka Homeless Coalition. And I sort of see that being is something that we want to support, continue to support. And so when they take a big chunk of it, I guess I was looking at that and saying, what about the other nonprofits? They're competing for a small pool of money. And that's why in this year, again, their construction year, I tried to pull them out and separate them so that those other nonprofits who are doing important work here in Sitka aren't vying for a tiny piece of the pot. Leach, he noted that we tend to run the gamut when it comes to the number of nonprofits that we have here in Sitka. They're all valuable. They're all contributing to the community. And so when I see that, I would expect that same, if we deny this tonight, that they'll be back here competing with other nonprofits for the 50,000 that we set aside for those grant awards. So there is heavy competition. And I guess I just need to wrap it up. So as I speak to you tonight, I know that there are people at the table who have never been in that situation. And I can't speak to your situations. I could speak to mine and say that I never have needed this service, and I probably will never need it. So keeping that in mind, sometimes it's hard for us to put ourselves in that position or have that empathy that would naturally come if you've experienced difficulty living and existing here in Sitka. So when I'm showing support for this organization and their mission, I'm showing support for our neighbors who could benefit. I'm talking about the 3 gentlemen who I saw last night sitting out in the cold with no other alternative. So just to end on elder wisdom, my very best friend, her grandmother is Bessie Johnson, and she used to tell them growing up, the tallest you're ever going to be is when you're kneeling down to help someone up. So that support that's needed by the Homeless Coalition is financial. That's what we can offer them. That allows them to assert their impact on our community of Sitka, especially when it comes to those who are most vulnerable. So that was long-winded, but I think that kind of wraps it up. And if you have any questions or wanted to discuss anything within the documents that we provided or the number, this is the forum that I thought would be appropriate to do that. So Ganeshish for hearing me.
Thank you, Crystal. And just procedurally, you'll have other opportunity to speak. I'd like this conversation to be free flowing. I'm not going to call on people. And before we start I wanted to thank you for filling this out. It's very, very clear and very helpful. And I'm glad you did it. But I also want to remind other members that although she filled it out, she didn't have, it's not a requirement as assembly members. You're free to do these motions or as you please. But this looks very good. And as far as the preparation that went into it, so I would like to open this up for discussion now.
I guess I'll open up here. I think the Homeless Coalition is a great organization. This is obviously a very noble cause. I did have a couple concerns and questions. When I was going through the proposal, there really wasn't much mention on what the 50,000 was going to be spent on. It was just kind of a general ask. The one thing I did see is that it would potentially be used for matching funds for other grants, which I guess is, that's a good thing, but I don't know if that's what the citizens of Sitka should be paying for. And my main concern with this is we already have the annual donation program for nonprofits, and we're now looking at going outside of that. And what sort of door are we opening? Are we about to have many, many more nonprofits coming to us and asking for funds? We have many, many, many nonprofits in this city. And if we have each one of them come at us for a similar donation, I mean, we're talking millions that would be, and who's to say that they're not all valuable and have noble causes? I want to give funding. We did last fall. I imagine with our donation program, we probably will again because of the cause. But I'm scared of the road that we will start walking down by giving any one of these nonprofits special treatment, I guess. I know we have here in the past, and that made me nervous. So I guess I'm just starting to see this door opening that we might snowball into something that becomes out of control. So that is some of my hesitation in this. We do have some pretty serious infrastructure needs coming up. And every time that we give extra money away anywhere, we're taking away from those needs. So I'm thinking of our infrastructure fund in this. And again, that makes me nervous. I have a very large goal before my time is up in this seat. And it's going to take some heavy fiscal discipline to get to that goal. And every time that we give a special accommodation, it's that much further away from my goal that every Sitkan will benefit from. So that is also on my mind. I definitely am not saying no to the Homeless Coalition, because like I said, they are a great organization. It is a great cause. But these are my concerns about this particular request.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just there were a couple of questions in there.
Oh, yeah.
Andrew, did you want to speak to as far as what it will be used for? So I know that this is your large construction year, but can you give a little bit more detail as to his first question? And then I can actually speak to the second one because I had those same hesitancies as far as treating nonprofits differently.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Assemblyman. You're asking all the right questions. To speak to your first question about what it would be used for, this is our large construction year and it would go towards those capital costs. I know that that is a bit of a broad answer, but it can absolutely be more specific than that. Right now, we're in our phase where we're working with our architects. We're working, these would go towards these early costs, which are needed for this capital project to be completed. For instance, a lot of money is going to go towards groundwork, and groundwork is something that this could be utilized towards in order to in order to get to that stage where we need to complete phase one, to complete the phase of the project.
No, that definitely helps, because just going through the request, I didn't see anything really specific what it was going to go towards, and kind of saw that it was might be used towards matching, but other than that, didn't see anything real specific. But yeah, no, I appreciate it.
And I think the language around the matching was just showing that the city of Sitka has supported them as they look to other resources to say the city is behind us. They support us on this project. They provided 1,550 or 50,000 in this year to support us. But I'm not trying to codify anything. So I hear the nonprofit, and that was my biggest hesitation too, was that we don't treat these different. They're all filling in gaps in service. The reason that I look differently upon this one, and we had this conversation back and forth, was because they are doing the construction this year. And we keep talking about, just at the last meeting, the seaplane base. Where is that at? How much is that going to cost? Concerns around construction. And so while I know that they're securing funding and will continue to do so, I thought if we can show them, just like the other city governments are throughout Alaska, that homelessness is something that we care about and want to address, but we don't have the capacity. This is a one-time, again, not codified, but it separates them out because, like I said, it's kind of cannibalizing on each other. They're all doing nonprofit work, and I see them competing for small dollar amounts. So that's the reason that I treated it differently this year, and specifically was because by December they want to have these 12 houses or 13 houses constructed, and so that's going to take a lot of capital outlay this year.
Crystal, what, or maybe Melissa, how much did we give, as you mentioned, when we give out the 50,000, how much did we give the homeless coalition last year?
15.5.
15.5, okay.
And then previous to that, it was like smaller 4,000 for the laundering and the shower services.
Okay, perfect.
And I think we did that the previous 2 years prior. I don't know. I wasn't on the assembly, but
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I have the same, I don't want to open the door here, right? Like we opened the door with the trollers and so far nobody's around coming for us yet. You know, I'd be more interested in like saying, this is the Sitka, you know, this is the Sitka house, right? Like this is the one you guys built, right? Like, so if you came to us with, I'd be happier if you came with a specific, this is what we need to do X, and then we could sponsor that as opposed to giving a nonprofit money. So I think, you know, there's a difference in those two things. And so I'm more comfortable with a more direct ask and a more direct, you know, we pay for all the porches. I don't know, you know, so something like that, so that it's easier for us to say, this is what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. We're supporting this particular thing, as opposed to opening the door and saying, hey, come on back as a nonprofit. Whenever you have a big construction thing, come see us. As opposed to saying, hey, we'll build the kiosk, we'll build the kitchen. You know, I'd be more comfortable with that, I guess. So if you can define that and say, this is what, you know, with your 50,000, you know, we'll get the plaque, then we're, you know, or maybe it's 62,000, I don't know, but, you know, something more concrete. I'd be more comfortable with that as part of our infrastructure outlay, as opposed to just giving money to nonprofits, because I don't want to open that door.
When I've been thinking about housing and money streams, Sitka used to get a lot from the state with limited reporting needs. It was a great partnership. Now that state money's not there as readily, so we're perhaps looking to the federal government, that next level, and that money's there, but comes with a lot of reporting requirements. And we're looking at these different levels. Same things happen with city asking for money for our bigger infrastructure stuff, for nonprofits asking for money for their needs. What seems perhaps very valuable to nonprofits looking to the city for money is we don't have any reporting requirements. And similar to what Tim was saying, it's like if it's a specific thing, we can, you know, donated by the City and Borough of Sitka Assembly 2023. That's a direct line there. So maybe some sort of reporting requirements or some sort of direct things. Is that something we want to talk about now? Is there some sort of stipulations we can add to this, or is there?
Now is the time to talk about it. Yeah, feel free.
Like, is there anything we want to attach to this request as a?
In the city of Ketchikan, they
Mhm.
did that. They gave
Okay.
them 125,000,
Mhm.
which was substantially more than we're asking for. And they
Mhm.
said, with that money, you're going to do this, this, and this. So that's
Yeah.
fair. I have a question for Andrea, just because I don't have the answer. The houses, how much to construct one house? Is it about $12,000?
Yeah, it's a little over $12,000 for the materials is our estimate, including labor, and to drywall, it'd be about $40,000 to $45,000 per tiny house.
So that's 12,000 for material costs with drywall and probably plumbing and electric and all of that. It adds up to 40 some. Okay. And then the earthwork is separate, and that's very challenging to estimate sometimes, especially from your kind of natural site.
Yeah, it's never been developed. It is a little bit harder to estimate. That's an entirely separate cost. Yeah, I could give an estimate, but I can't be.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to share my kind of view on this. First of all, I want to thank Andrew for speaking out and explaining things very, very well. I've met you a couple times before. And I want to thank Crystal for putting this all together. It's very methodical, which I really like. So as far as this, I share some of the same concerns some of the other members have. I view this as a very crucial and important organization and thing that we're doing. I value it, and I'm fully 100% in spirit behind it. And I would possibly like to give some, but given that the estimated net income, balance is going to be about 28,000, and we have another other ask here, I don't feel comfortable with the 50,000, but I guess I do agree. A lot of these nonprofits are doing things at much cheaper than we could be doing them. And I believe that, like I said, this is a worthy cost. My concern is I've talked to a couple people. I feel like I'm getting a little bit of support fatigue. Last year, we added 2 new positions with the sustainability coordinator in that budget, and then the Parks and Rec in that budget. Those 2 big budgets out of thin air. And I've had another ask from another organization, and we met and I talked, and then I decided no, I wasn't ready to support that just because of the money issue. And my concern is about the opening the door to nonprofits, and where do you say no? And my concern is for me, as far as this is all concerned, obviously, I think we all want to help people directly, and I'm trying, we want to do something to help everyone, and that's very, very crucial. My concern right now is about the infrastructure, as Chris mentioned. Well, there's some big projects coming up, and as Melissa actually said before, nobody wants to talk about. I think everyone realizes we have a problem, but in general, nobody wants to talk about infrastructure till it breaks, and that's too late. And it's going to cost millions upon millions of dollars to deal with this. And so it's not just going to be the rate increases. Hopefully when the fiscal year ends, we will have the administrator makes a recommendation for a certain amount of money to go into the infrastructure sinking fund, which we use to repair as well. And so in my mind, I want to do as much as we can to add to that, because we have not, as a friend put it, we haven't done major repairs or contributions to infrastructure for a long time. And now the bill is due and we have to pay that. Unfortunately, it's landing on us. And so we have to have toilets that flush. We have to have, electricity that runs. We have to have all these things. And it's absolutely fundamentally crucial to everyone. And then walk in a nonprofit like the Sitka Homeless Coalition. I believe in the mission. I think it's great. For me tonight, as far as that was my broad kind of thought on it. As far as like this ask, I'm not willing to go into a negative budget, a deficit budget. And I know that is preliminary. The number she gave us of 28,000 is preliminary. But I would be willing to perhaps, I know we're not doing a motion, we're doing this by consensus. I would prefer to amend this and give, I know it's not even close to what you've asked, but maybe amend this to 10,000 as a one-time donation. In addition, we made that donation in the fall. And that's a completely separate issue. This would be a one-time gift to help with the construction. I would be willing to do 10,000, but I can't support the 50,000. Again, that's not because of any undesire to support. It's a matter of we only have so many funds. There's things like, mandated union raises, which are appropriate. There's a lot of things to pay for at the bottom line. And I don't want to go into a deficit budget. So for me, I can do 10,000. But for this, I don't feel comfortable doing more. Anybody else have any comments to that? I appreciate the input.
Sure.
Oh, John, he is, okay, go ahead, John.
Yeah, thanks. I have a couple questions as this goes forward. And mainly because I think I know it's responsible for me to present a balanced budget, and that's what we're gonna go forward with, coming to you by March 2nd with the draft budget. But every year we kind of put up the list of all the nonprofits that some of them have hard-coded lines in the budget. If this one were included, my first question is, would the intent be for this one to continue on year after year as a hard-coded line in the budget that would still get presented every year on whether or not we want to keep that funding level at the same level it is now? So that's my first question. And then the second one is, to present that balanced budget, would the assembly, if this goes forward, would the assembly want me to present some options and some potential cuts or decreases in other areas to keep that budget balanced and not go into a deficit budget?
John, I'm sure Crystal's going to answer this, but in the resource proposal, on item number 7, it said, what are the future costs of this resource? And the answer is no, there are no direct future costs associated to the city associated with this resources, meaning it's my understanding from Crystal, this is a one-off, correct?
Yeah, and I thought I stated that during, yeah. Do we want to address the second question? Because we've also had some other questions that have come up and I've been taking notes over here. So I guess what I have to do is turn it back to the strategic plan. So those categories that we talked about, I know that other cities cover homelessness as a category within housing, right? Do we have a plan or action steps that will lend to it? Or are we saying the survey for 750,000, we threw our support behind that by consensus, we said add that into the budget. This is a much smaller ask. And I thought it was a category that wasn't, where do we see that? Is that just not a category that we want to include as part of that action step under goal number 1? Or do we have a different plan in place to address that? Because the reason I brought these two forward is I saw us making progress on the strategic plan, which we unanimously passed. So if we have other ideas on how to address homelessness, it doesn't have to be this way. But I'm not trying to create more work for the city. And again, I looked at it, they are starting construction in this fiscal year. That's why I felt it was appropriate to bring forward. So I really want to turn it back to the strategic plan and say, it doesn't have to be this, but what are we going to do for these residents who are here in Sitka sitting in 29-degree weather right now? So I guess I asked,
Yeah.
I ended with a question, but I wanted to, I just want to remind us that that's our guiding document. And that was when I was considering what to bring forward and if to bring it forward, I said it has to fit within this. And I know John hammers that away with his staff, and I want to basically uphold that standard. So I felt that this was a way to get a lot for a little. And I support 750 to do a survey so that we could open up housing. That's never going to benefit our homeless who are struggling. They're our most vulnerable. We don't step up. We couldn't step up. I can't have the city of Sitka build a cabin, but they could do it for $45,000. So to address the concern of, I want it to physically be something tangible that we could put our name on. Maybe we change it from 50,000 to we sponsor a cabin, 45. So this is a discussion. None of this was hardline. This was kind of like my own thought process and trying to bring something forward. So I appreciate that we're having this discussion. I do have to go back to the strategic plan and say, if not this, then what? Because those are Sitkans as well. So those are some of the thoughts. I got a lot of scribble going on here.
Yeah, I can kind of answer some of those thoughts. and I do agree 100%. This aligns with our strategic plan, 100%. And yeah, we're throwing out 750,000 for a study, which, it's a lot of money. Compared to this, this is nothing. My concern is running into a deficit budget, and so we gave 15,500 previously this year. Another 10 would bring it to 25,000 if we did 10. So that would be $25,500 we will have given, which is not insignificant. That's actually close to what we just gave the ATA. Not by design that I come to that number, but I want to do all of these things as we can afford them. I just don't want to go into a deficit. And I feel like for me, giving 10,000 is a good faith commitment. I currently, long-term, that was another kind of question you had in there. I'm not in favor of adding the homeless coalition as a yearly budget line item. I'm not saying never, I'm just saying not yet. Like I said, we added we added positions last year. There's a lot of transition and change happening right now. I'd feel more comfortable finding out, for a year or two, find out where we are, how much money we're really going to be getting in the long term. So then I would possibly feel more comfortable adding them as a long-term budget item, but I would prefer right now to do a one-off for this particular item. And then of course they're allowed to apply for the, part of the $50,000 pot. So by me asking for it to be 10,000, that's two reasons. One, to stay within our budget and not go in the hole. And two, I forgot my second thought. John, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, we can make room. I agree that this aligns with our strategic plan. So what I was looking for some guidance on is if you provide us with what that level is going to be tonight, I can pitch out some ideas like reduce the Parks and Rec budget or scale back on some of the other studies we have planned. I'm just trying to get to that balance level as we move forward. So, it's not my place to recommend adding or not adding this specific initiative, but I just wanted you all to know that we can look for areas to scale back in other areas to be able to keep the budget balanced.
And not having all of those items that we added in this year, I think I'd feel more comfortable with that rather than trying to fit within the 20,000. I think we should consider these, whether they're doable, and then ask for him to take a fine tooth comb to that and make recommendations. So I too support us staying within our means, right? I'm not trying to go over and beyond. I didn't know that the draft was finalized, so I thought if we build this in, we'll be okay. But I think that makes more sense than us trying to half these to equal that 20,000 to stay within. Because on the second item, that's I'll explain that more. It just doesn't make sense to split that in half as well.
So I'd be in favor, John, if you want to come up with some options. I still not 100% sure if I'm feel comfortable with the 50,000. But if you can come up with some creative ideas, I could go up some. I don't know how much. Kind of depends on the options that we come up with. Again, my concern is it's really hard because there's so many nonprofits that they're worthy. To 50,000 just seems like a fairly big ask. I know it's just a one-year thing, but so bottom line for me tonight, the direction is, John, if you could provide some ideas of different things we could change or whatever to increase it by different amounts, because I could go more, just not up to 50,000. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that or any comments on that.
I do. No, I think maybe I wasn't clear earlier. I think this is a unique circumstance. This is not a nonprofit that's ongoingly doing something and coming to us and saying, hey, give us 50 grand. This is a one-time deal. I've lived here for quite a while, and this is the first time that we've really put any shovel to the ground to deal with this issue. And it's been an ongoing issue for as long as I've been here. So, I don't see this as a nonprofit coming to us to break the nonprofit protocol. I see this as us investing in an opportunity to deal with an issue that's been a big, huge issue for the community. And I agree with Crystal. Do we create another department of the city to take care of this? Because, I mean, this is an ongoing issue and it's a bigger issue than it looks like. So, I think for me, this is an important step. So this is more infrastructure than it is nonprofit. And if we can get away from saying we're giving a nonprofit money to saying we're investing in Sitkans futures here, and this is the first time we've ever even had an opportunity to try this, then that's where it's at for me. So, I would prefer to have a concrete object that the city supports, kind of like buying a cabin, like we're number 12 or something. That would make more sense, and we can get behind that and say, this is what we did. This is our concrete contribution to this project. But good grief, we haven't done anything as a city about this other than to give money to the Homeless Coalition for the last decades. And, they support that. They get fed, they get towels washed, whatever it is they need to do. But this is a unique opportunity for us to actually get something done. I think we need to be a part of that. I think we need to invest in that. So yeah, this is change in our budget. And I think John can find, the additional funding for us to support one of these cabins. I guess that's where I'm at. So I understand exactly what you're saying, but man, I really don't want to get in the middle of saying people are infrastructure, right? Like we've done that before as a community, and no one wins on that one, right? You say, we're not going to support this. It affects people because we need to do roads. People get a little bleary eyed on that one, because that's kind of an interesting statement. So no, I'm in favor of being a supporter of this particular thing. And I think as a community, we really need to say that we are in favor of this, because this is a big deal. This is going to change people's lives. And so I'm in favor of that. Do we need a balanced budget? Absolutely. Let's figure out what's important. Let's make sure we do that. But, if there's 3 more potholes that we don't fill and someone gets housing ongoingly, I'm going to vote in favor of the housing.
Yes, that's, I was voting for people before potholes. We've been using the word support to directly mean monetary contribution. I think there might be other ways we as an assembly or we as the city can support this goal of housing our unhoused population. Looking over the strategic plan, goal number 2, communication action item 3.2, it says annually convene nonprofits, CBS boards and commissions and other community groups for a summit to discuss community challenges, updates, and opportunities for collaboration. John, is there any movement on that? Is something we're going to see maybe this year, that we can get a housing collaboration group at a summit to support this overall idea of housing options for all in Sitka?
There is some movement on it, but we don't have concrete plans yet. We're trying to develop a kind of a scheduled cycle of how we're going to gather all the nonprofits and really any community groups that can help support this. And we are in the process of planning that summit and where we're going to stick it in on the calendar.
That's another way to support in a long-term sustainable way that we can all work together for housing for all. Like, money is great too. We can maybe pass a resolution of support. There's many ways to support, and I'm not saying the money is bad, but I don't think it's a direct line with support meaning money.
Good point. Anyone else on this item? I think John and Melissa, I feel like we've kind of given you, my understanding of the consensus is that there's an interest to fund this, not necessarily agreed on the amount, but the desire for you and Melissa to prepare possible options to increase, this is from my point of view, to provide a variety of funding options between 50,000 and then maybe less than that. I asked for 10, but if you could provide a couple options. Melissa, did you have something?
Sure. Just for the purpose, the draft budget will be coming out tomorrow. So just listening to the conversation, I think for starters, we would put 50,000 in. If there is still a deficit after we, finish up our final review, then we would come forward with options. Is that?
Yeah, does anybody have any objections to that?
I don't have an objection, but I did want to go back to Chris and Tim, because you wanted something that was more, you wanted to know where it was going. So I'm open to, if we wanted to sponsor a house, if that would make you feel better, or if we've alleviated that by having thorough discussion. Of course, I came with 50,000 and I'd like to keep it there. I certainly don't want to take it down to 10, but if there's something in between, do we want to pass that along? I just wanted to see if there were kind of changing views with the discussion, or if there's still that concern, because I want to address it.
Can we ask you guys, the coalition, to come up with sponsors, or do you have sponsorship levels out there already?
Yeah, we do have sponsorship, and that is for individual organizations and community members at that level of what the cost of the cabin would be specifically for the materials themselves. So we have cabin sponsorships, which will reflect in the form of plaques for those organizations that have made those sponsorships for $12,000. We at the moment don't have a higher level, but this wouldn't reflect, this doesn't reflect the full cost of construction, of course, but that is currently our sponsorship level, which we have available to people.
How many of those have been sponsored already?
8 of the 12.
So 48,000 would sponsor the additional 4?
Matt, yes. Oh, yes.
So I don't know. John, are you still on there? I don't see him. Okay. there
I'm
you
still
go.
on.
So do you feel like you have gotten direction?
I do. I'm sympathetic to where Melissa is at, though. We're trying to push the general fund budget out tomorrow, so we'll have to. Some hard numbers tonight would be very helpful, so we don't publish something. The assembly gets it, and then all the changes after that, because once it's released, we make changes by motion, and it can make it a pretty long process. If there's a number that we want to settle on, and even some hard numbers of areas that we want to consider cutting, the nice to haves are always easy to cut before the must haves. And if I'm being frank, Parks and Rec is the first area I'm going to look at to decrease, just to keep things balanced. But I'm not there in person, so I don't have a good picture from Melissa on how much flexibility there is in the numbers right now.
So I'm struggling here because I don't want to agree to a budget that is in a deficit. But I don't think you are prepared to offer any specific cuts to other areas in order to provide for funding. I obviously would like 10,000. I think other members would like more. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well,
We
I
could
would
also, I'm sorry.
Well, it's just, because, as I said, I'm still doing my final review and comb through just to make sure that the numbers you have are where they need to be. So, I wouldn't want to get too specific on what cuts we would be making. The budget hasn't gone out. I think that, if we put the 50 in and after all the reviews done, there is a deficit. John and I can probably work. We can let you know if any cuts made that will have a visible impact. But again, there's still, I know I've got a few questions to various staff about items that I'm still waiting to hear back on. And so, that 28 is where we are right now, which gives us an idea that we're pretty close to break even. So I think if we put the 50 in, John and I can work to either come forward, find something that we feel comfortable making a cut to, or we would come forward and have the question for you.
Okay. So as far as me, just to clarify, like I said, I do support the coalition. It's just my hesitancy about the funding is that like I mentioned, we had another group that pointed to the strategic plan and asked for funds. And it's just human nature, I guess, to be concerned about agreeing to things and then other people saying, well, you did this or you did that. I don't know. I'm struggling as a person to know where the boundaries are or where to pull that from. So I would obviously be okay with increasing more than 10,000, but I basically, for me, I don't want to say, yeah, do a 50,000 and then you publish a budget that's in the hole tomorrow or whatever. Can you, because it seems like there's more members that want more towards 45 or 50,000 than not. Could you possibly publish a budget that doesn't have a deficit, including that fact? That's what I was hearing before.
Yeah, yes. I mean, we can do work internally. Whether or not it's something that, we can find something that's not going to have clear impacts. I think if there was going to be a change in the level of service from cuts, that would be something we would want to discuss with you. But we could present the budget as break even. And then, if there was an impact to the level of service, we would have that discussion at the assembly table so that you were very clear that, you have a balanced budget. However, it's, there is an impact on something, some level of service, whether it's, Parks and Rec or something else.
Okay. And there is, of course, another budget item for 20,000 too. Okay. So I feel like we could probably move forward. Does that sound good? Chris, do you have anything?
Only if you can explain what we're moving forward after having done.
Okay. After Chris, any comments from Chris?
I'm kind of taking it off the rails slightly here, but another board I sit on, we have very strict rules when it comes to financial asks, and we follow them. And it's for this reason, because it's getting odd. We're getting personal feelings involved. So I like that structure of our rules because we can keep all the personal out. It falls within our bylaws or it doesn't. I'm going to use the annual donation program as my rule that I will follow. Issue is that we already have some that are outside of that. I understand that, but here's just something I'm thinking about. You'll have to tell me that it's stupid and stop it. But so we take our surplus of 28,000, or any other surplus that we may end up finding within this budget, we apply it to our annual donation program. So instead of 50,000 for the annual donation program, we turn it into 78,000 for the annual donation program. That would give more for potentially just the Homeless Coalition if the assembly decides at that time, or for other nonprofits who apply. But it's just a random thought. I'm fine with John and Melissa bringing a budget together tomorrow. And at this point, I'd say also just do the full ask. Let's see the full pain and exactly what we need to look at to cut, and maybe other options, maybe a half option, a $25,000 option as well. So those are my couple things I've been thinking of here.
Okay, so what we're putting forward is like, for me, I'm still not comfortable with the 50,000. I could go up to 20 or 25. I know it seems really abstract, but because there's 5 of us here and 3 seem to be more interested in like 45 or 50. We move on to the next item, knowing that Melissa's going to add in the 50,000, possibly 20 more thousand, and you're going to try to find that money from somewhere and then publish the budget tomorrow. And then at the next meeting, if we want to take that out or modify that, because there may be changes, cuts that need to be made, we'll discuss and make motions then as necessary. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you, Melissa? John?
That's the understanding I have. We'll put the full ask in the budget and show it to the assembly at when we publish the general fund and see what it looks like.
Okay.
And
So,
that gets us 4 houses with the city of Sika's name on it.
That's correct, yeah.
so it's past the top of the hour. We have one more agenda item. I don't anticipate it taking too long, but I think we could use a break. Okay, so it's 8:15. We got everyone seated. I think we're ready to go on item number 2, the resource proposal request for real training. Same thing, Crystal, if you wanna, this is your request, wanna go for it?
Yeah, this one will be much more concise. So again, I put 2 documents into the packet. One is that resource form. The other is a 1-page kind of slide presentation that Melissa was my inspiration. I wanted to sum it up and make it easy and understandable. This is a new program. So I'm not going to pretend that I have an expertise. It's the Real Institute, and you basically have to submit an application to be accepted into a cohort. REAL stands for Race, Equity, and Leadership. And it's basically the National League of Cities. They started this last year. So I don't remember if I reached out to you. I
Yeah.
literally had 2 weeks before the application period closed. That was in September. We missed it. So we could have did it by appropriation. I said, I'm just going to plan. This is something that I want to pursue in the next fiscal year. What they do is they bring together 10 to 14 cohorts throughout the United States who are interested in kind of tackling this and doing it best practice. So we know that we could fumble the ball and we could learn from experiences that we have on these issues, but they actually have experts who know what they're doing as far as addressing systemic issues within local governments. So it's a new program. This is the first year that they're doing it. It seems to be going successful. I would like for us to have a cohort of 3 who would apply and become well-versed in these issues, basically empower them with information, see what other cities who are participating are doing, what they're struggling with, basically a learning process. So again, pulled the strategic plan and said, I'm going to start and kind of live by this guide. I think it directly holds up strategic goal 2.2, which reads, identify opportunities to foster relationships with underrepresented groups, populations in the community, and implement findings to improve service delivery to these groups. So we remember in the previous budget discussions that we already approved something under this as an action step. I don't think they're related. I think they both support this in different ways. So this one, I think it starts at the top. I think I wanted to include this in this budget as opposed to an appropriation down the road. And the reason I wanted to do that is I think the city needs to lead on this issue. They need to set an intention for the next fiscal year and say, we recognize this as an issue. This can be something that really builds the relationships within the community. And so I think on the document I provided links to the page where it discussed more. I hope you guys were able to go and kind of dive and answer some of your questions. Obviously, I haven't participated in it. I reached out to the program coordinator to have discussions about how it's going. The timeline, I included that one. That's going to be adjusted. So you can see it starts after the start of their federal fiscal year, but actually more like January timeframe. So most of it will be concluded by that July, with exception to one conference in November. That would be in the next fiscal year. So what I'm requesting is 20,000. That was an estimate for travel costs. That's basically to provide 3 people transportation to and from for 2 in-person summits. They will cover the hotel. You do not have to register for the conference. There are no fees associated with that. And so it would just be the travel as well as the per diem.
Crystal, did you want to provide just a really basic for the public summation? I mean, I know it's hard to do, but what the training would be,
Yeah, so the training is 2 in-person and 2 virtual. So it's 12 comprehensive days. It would be you and the other cohort. So let's say there are 10 other cities. You guys will either go into a room together in person or you will join virtually. And so the focus of the program, I can kind of read that out because that's in the packet. But since you asked that question, the program will provide support as municipalities explore and navigate solutions to the following question. What is holding your city back from achieving racial equity? What challenges and opportunities related to racial equity does your city want to solve? And what support do you have from your community to undertake this work? These are some of the questions that will help drive this opportunity. As far as the locations, Washington, DC, and then I think Minnesota are the two locations. That doesn't, it's to be determined. So I can't tell you where they'll be, but that would be basically 2 plane tickets. So again, they try to do it virtually, but there's also so much that you get out of being in the same room with folks. So they would want to travel the cohort down for those at least 2 required opportunities.
Well, oh, hold on, John. We'll wait till Crystal's done. Oh, you're done? Okay, for now. John, go ahead.
Just a couple questions, and I apologize because I'm here virtual and I'm not very good with this thing, and I can't find the documents on my computer. So I apologize if it's in there already. So we know where to put this in the budget specifically for the travel costs. Is this cohort going to be city staff? Is this cohort going to be assembly members? Is the assembly going to choose this cohort? Where should I plug the travel and training into? Like what area of the budget are you anticipating or envision?
So the application process is not going to be due until January. It's going to be a mix of leadership within the city. So staff, I would hope it would be John or somebody at his level who can inform policy regulations, that sort of thing. But then also we are the leaders of the city. So it would be a mix. And so I don't know if it's appropriate to say 1 assembly person and 2 staff. It could go either way. So I don't think I'm concretely answering your question. But the other thing is, we all know that we work on a timeline, an election cycle that comes and goes each October. So by having the application roll out in the early new year, so January, we'll have a better understanding of who may be able to represent or who would be interesting on behalf of Assembly at that time. So it would kind of become more clear as we move into that December before the application comes out in January. I don't know how helpful that is. I hear what you're asking, and right now we don't know, but it would be 3 people, and it's a mix of assembly and city leadership, city staff leadership. Is there a way to budget around that?
John, did you hear that?
I did. I was going to see if Melissa was going to chime in. I can't see her on the
Okay,
screen, but
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I think it would probably make the most sense to just put this one up under administrator and assembly, knowing that it might be, someone who is not on assembly, or it might be someone from another department, but I think we could just charge it to that line item in the budget.
So Crystal's given her basic introduction. Open it up for our comments.
I'll be happy to start off. It's hard to speak against the concept. However, I have participated in a number of these sorts of things through my career, and some have been great. And they tend to be the ones that have been around for a while and have been kind of run through the ringer. My hesitation on this one is the short-term nature of this particular group having done this. And so I don't really, I also looked it up and there isn't a track record yet. And so, I don't know, it's kind of a tough thing. It's like, I'm not speaking against the need for this or against the importance of this or the immediacy of this, but I'm questioning whether or not this is the right answer for that. Just because I don't know, because I've seen some of these done less well, and it's sort of it can be very counterproductive and take a long time to overcome. So there's my hesitancy. So if this had been going for 35 years and it had some history behind it of great success, then I'd be a lot more interested in it, or be a lot more comfortable, I guess would be the best way for it. But in terms of So, you know, if instead we want to say, let's make sure we look around and get this in place. And we find the program that's going to do this job for us, whether it's this one or another one. I think that's more where I'm at on this one right now, just because you can't do it. If you do it wrong, it's really not going to help. So, or it's not going to have the impact that we could get from this. And so my hesitancy is just how long they have been in doing this and what, you know, what successes have they had. So, and I couldn't find a whole lot more information. So that's my concern. There are groups, I don't have them off the top of my head, who've been doing this a lot longer and have more of a history and have worked through some of these issues. And I'd like to see a little more about that maybe.
But
So I was looking at their website earlier today, and I guess let me start this way. Now that we're looking at a budget that's going into a deficit with our last item, and only further going into a deficit with this one without some cuts, it brought me to what a thing that I saw on their website, and I'll quote it, is Real offers customized training to match city needs. The biggest expense here is the travel. I guess it's a no fees for attending the actual conference. So I'm wondering if they are offering some sort of customized training, and it is already partially virtual. Can we request that the whole thing is virtual? At least look into that. I'm not really against it, but obviously going into a deficit here, it's kind of hard to want to spend the money and take from somewhere else. So I think that's worth looking into. You know, when I was reading this whole thing, I guess maybe just being me, the question was, what is holding your city back? And all I could think of is why are we needing the training? What is the end goal? Maybe I'm just very naive, but I'm questioning the need, I guess, at this point. I guess I've always assumed we've had good relations. We have proclamations, we have government to government meetings. We've recognized different people in the community. I guess maybe I'm just a very naive person, but I don't understand why we need this training.
Before we can I start addressing these questions before I fall behind? So I hear ya. And I was searching. So as far as where I heard about this program, it was Indigenous Municipal Leaders, which is a free group that I'm a part of. And what we do is we try to support other because there are so few of us, right? So that is how it came on my radar. We reached out to AML to say, do you know of a better one? One that's established 30 years in the business. I'm not finding anything that says local leadership will benefit, here's how. So I guess I'm opening with a plea to my fellow assembly members. If you know of a better one, I'm not partial to this one. Kellogg Foundation seems reputable. This is through Municipal City Leagues. That seems reputable. But you're right, the track history is 1 year. I want longer. So I'm not destined to, it has to be this one, but I need your help. If there's a better one out there, let's find it and put our intention forward to address these issues. Because how long do we wait? So we do see a need, but does that mean we just put it off for 10 years until we find the right one? I think I want us to make movement, especially looking at the transition. So October is coming around. Who is it? You, me, actually the three of us. Right now, I think I fill a number of categories as far as being females. They look to us. As far as being from a community of color, people look to me. What if we're not here after October? Then where's the diversity? I have a concern because I have to empower people who don't necessarily come from marginalized communities to feel adequate in bringing these issues forward. I'm going to bring up Kevin Knox because he led on this issue and he would bring people in to support him. He's no longer here. So we can't put that on his shoulders anymore, which means we have to come up to speed and feel adequate in doing this because this is a hard topic to talk about. I think the biggest concerns that I have when it comes to our local government, as far as this is a problem, I think we need to look to see who's represented from the community on our commissions, boards, committees, here at the assembly table, within our staff. Does that reflect the community at large? If not, they're underrepresented. But I also think who's participating. That strategic plan that we're upholding, right? What we heard was that we tried, but we came up short. We would have rather have had input from this community. We did the best that we could. They're not showing up. Those two things, let's just leave it right there. Let's start the discussion with that. Underrepresentation and lack of participation are identified things that this will speak to. I hope it goes beyond that, but I think it needs to start there. So I have a passion for the Homeless Coalition. I'm not involved with them. Easier to speak to that issue. This one I struggle with, so I apologize if it's not coming out clear. I do see a need. I think the need is timely. I hear concern about the budget. We'd rather have a surplus, definitely don't want a deficit, but that doesn't mean that I'm willing to minimize the importance of this here and now. I'm just not willing to make that and say maybe next year or 5 years out after they show us that this is worthy. Because unless we're willing to take these issues on, like Kevin Knox did, it's just going to be vacant. And if people aren't actively calling out, which is difficult to do, it's not going to be discussed. But we see it in the chambers, we see it. So I think I addressed the question so far, and I appreciate this discussion. It's a hard discussion to have. And I hear the concern about the travel. I would love it if it was all virtual. I don't know if I can request that they adjust their programming. But again, if we know of other agencies that are reputable, that work directly with municipal governments or city governments, I'm open to it. I just happen to know that this exists because I got the program coordinator on the phone to say, year one, tell me more about it. Did you have anybody from Alaska? If not, Alaska is willing to, we're willing to take the lead in Alaska and say, we went through this program. Here's how we benefited. Here's how we implemented changes. So if you want to know, the application is competitive. So things that would go in there are things that were brought forward in the last couple of years. So looking at things like the city seal, that seemed like a small change, but those are things that will change your government. The Baranoff statue is another example. These things may not seem big, but they are. But a lot of times they're overlooked because we don't know what to look for. So yeah, what other kind of discussion can we have on the topic? I really do appreciate it. It's a hard thing for me to talk about, but this is a discussion that I wanted to have in front of the public. So I'm gonna sheesh for coming forward with courage in your words.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% on the timeliness. We, the school district is and faces these particular issues as well. We're in the process of renaming Baranoff so that it reflects more of that. I mean, Kikuchiin was renamed at one point too. So, I think there's no question about the timeliness. I guess what I would, but I don't really, is it possible for us to task the John and crew with coming up with an answer to this by X date? Is that a better solution to this? So that they can do the research and figure out, a program that will work, or bring a list of them to us and we can pick one from it. I'm not saying no to this particular one. It's just looking at it, it doesn't have the track record that I would like to see. Because as I said, through my career, I've done a number of these sorts of things. And the ones that have been done well are fantastic and have long lasting impacts. And you can see it in our schools today. And there's been ones that have come and gone and we were like, don't remember that one. So, and I think, or even gone the other way and made people very, very angry for no good reason. So, so I think that's where I'm at with it. I'd like to see more options but no, I'm not like, let's just shove it off and forget about it. Let's get some options back by, I don't know, pick a date, May, and then let's start moving on it. So, and at that point, we'll know what the cost would be and we can go forward from there. We'll have a better sense of our budgets, things like that. So I'd like to see it happen that way, I guess is my suggestion. But no, I mean, don't take away from any of my comments that we should stop doing this. I mean, if we should have done it 10 years ago.
Chris, with your familiarity with the application process, is there a chance we'd set this money aside and then we wouldn't be enrolled in the program? Like, what do you think about that from your talks with the coordinator?
So it does require the application. And I don't know if you visited the website, but it says, here's what we're looking for. So they need a letter of support from the mayor, which obviously, if we as a body are supportive of it, we can put that forward. It's also saying, what have you done? So you have to show that you're open to making changes that are necessary. And so we would give examples of, we're in the teeth room, or we changed our city seal, we put a statue in a museum. Those are the type of examples that would support, yes, huge. Those are things that would support.
Just letting her know to put that microphone on. when she's
I'm
talking.
Nobody
having a
could hear us.
conversation here without my mic on.
Yeah, so the application would be submitted
Mhm.
and then considered. So I can't
Mhm.
tell you if you've submitted an application that's complete that you're going to be accepted.
Yeah.
There's always a possibility that we appropriate money for this and then we're not
Mhm.
accepted this year and we can
Mhm.
apply in the next year.
Yeah.
I just, succession planning is something that John talks about with his position. I'm
Mhm.
going to talk about that with my position too. If I'm not here in October,
Mhm.
I want empowerment to be bestowed upon the assembly because we basically set the direction of the city. We approved that strategic plan that said goal number 2, we need to work on our relationships within the community. But I can recognize how difficult that would be if you don't come from a marginalized community and have that direct experience to say, this needs to happen, this is a need, and here's how I'm going to do it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, of course, and more. Good. So Melissa, if we were to appropriate money tonight and we didn't get that application process in our favor, can you just hold over that money to the next year and the next year until we are approved?
We would probably know by budget time, and I would suggest just including it in the budget again. So it would require a reappropriation of some sort, so it doesn't automatically roll over.
But a doable thing. So that's great.
Just to kind of expand on the conversation that you were having. So as far as giving direction, again, I'm not coming here with an expertise in this area. And so I would feel comfortable because I was willing to do this as a separate appropriation when I was super enthused and wanting to make that deadline. It wasn't timely to do that. If we anticipate that this could be it, but we wanted to look and ensure that this is the best bang for our buck, or is there a better, well-versed, would be more meaningful for the city, I'd be okay with that too. So I don't want to shut that down. I absolutely heard you. You had fair points there. And again, I was willing to bring it as a separate appropriation because I think even if we had this discussion with the tribe as far as their concerns at the government to government, it wasn't on this agenda, but it's been on every previous agenda. And so I know within the community that we do see a need. You're right. We want to find the best program. If they want to take on that task, they can. I've looked for other ones. Again, wasn't finding a whole lot. And I thought it needs to be specific to this. So just like the school district, they have some that will empower school districts. I want it to be at the local government level where you could kind of learn from each other. I like the cohort, but I'm open to that. Very open to that. And so I'm glad that you brought that as part of the discussion.
So I'd like to make my comments known now. It came out weird, but it's late. I'm tired. Yeah, I think, so I have to own something here. Crystal approached me about this last year and the timing just wasn't right and everything. And I had suggested, well, why don't we just have some people come here? Because then, you could serve more people. And I never got to it. I never did it. I just got busy and it never happened. So I kind of, I have concerns like what Tim has, as far as the type or like if this is the history or whatever. But I have no problem supporting a training in race and equity. I think that's important. So I would be in favor more of just kind of setting aside the money and then, just kind of we talked about, see if that's the best bang for a buck. It would be nice if we could have training here, like bring someone here. And then like have it for like senior staff and the assembly or whatever, but and that's an option we could consider, The budget, 20,000 does seem like a lot, but we don't know what the real cost would be, so it's better to budget more. And then if you don't need it, you don't need it. I share the same concerns about spending money more than about the deficit. So we have the other item, then we'll have this, that's 70,000 that we weren't planning on. But I'm okay with including this in the current budget and then so obviously we're gonna have to look for other things to cut or maybe you find things that you thought staff like were requests that you said you were waiting on. Maybe there's something that they don't actually need. I don't know. But when push comes to shove, I don't want to pass a deficit budget, but I support these items, this item. No, we talked about the last one already, but this item. So I think we should just include it and then hopefully you guys can find something. Did you have anything else, Chris?
I guess kind of going off of what you and Tim were saying, I'd definitely like to look into whether it's a different organization or even within Real, to continue to look at different options. I do actually like Kevin's suggestion of having someone come here instead of just having 3 people go through the training, potentially more. I think that is a really interesting proposal there. So I think we should at least look into stuff like that as well. And yeah, I guess throw it in the budget and see what happens and what everything looks like in the end. But at least continue looking into it and look further, I guess.
As I was building it, I rounded up. So I thought it would, and I don't know, and here's why, because I thought it would come closer to 16,000. And to answer your question about registration, they lob this on top of a summit that's happening because they think since you're already going to be there, you'll come to this and then you can stay for the training. You don't have to go to we haven't attended those, the National League of Conferences, their summit. It's an option. So I didn't count that registration. I want to be there for the summit that deals specifically with this. That wasn't something that I factored in additional registration to stay for the remainder of the conference. That would be like an additional 2 days or such. I hope that clears it up. So there's no registration once you're accepted into the program. They do attach it to a pre-existing large conference, just in case, since you're already going there, 2 for 1, you would have to pay for registration. I did not build that in because I thought I want us to sign up and invest in this. And it doesn't seem like this has been a conference that Assembly has regularly attended. We seem to heavily attend AML as opposed to a national conference. So just wanted to make sure to clear that up. There are no registration fees once you're accepted into the program. You don't have to attend the other portion, which would be a national conference. So the 20,000, I don't know. The reason that I built it up was because if we go at 16 and it's going to take 17,000 to pay for 3 people to participate in these 2 in person, we're going to have to bring it back to the table, which would be fine. But if you really want to get more accurate, that's a buffer. I don't think it's going to take us to 20, and you seem so concerned about deficit or not. If that 4,000 makes a difference, just wanted to weigh in on that one too. As far as the training for all of us, I think that is imperative. That's on my list of things to do as well. And not just us. I think it should be the school board, tribal council. There should be an invitation to host something locally to kind of help us build a better understanding of this place and issues that, so it wouldn't be this. It wouldn't be looking at ordinances and policies that have systemic racism built into the systems at large. It wouldn't be this comprehensive. It's not going to be 12 full day conference sessions where you're talking about how to enact policies or how to make adjustments to ordinances. It would be a training, not necessarily the same content. So I would love to send all 7 of us down for that cohort, but they tend to think, or they've chosen to have a cohort be 3 people who apply for it. They want a mix of the city staff as well as the assembly leadership. That seems to be their framework, but I hear you guys on the in-person training here in Sitka for anybody who's in a leadership position, so that we're coming more prepared to the table to reach the entire community. 100% feeling that. So
Yeah.
I do think it's a little bit separate though, just because this would be a smaller cohort. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, it looks like a train the trainers sort of thing. So I mean, you send people off, they come back, they share their knowledge with everyone around them. Yeah, I think if we're going to take a look around, then I think we need to limit it to the first meeting in May that we're going to make a decision about it. So if we put it in the budget by the first meeting in May, I think that's where I'm comfortable. I don't want to look at this forever. I want to come to some sort of thing and start moving forward. So, and I'd like to task John with figuring, finding some other options potentially. And if they don't exist, I understand. We'll go with this.
How do we want them to present those options? So obviously the organization, how long they've been in service, the cost estimates, whether their information would be valuable for us to kind of take that and weigh at the table, whether or not, what direction to go.
No, I mean, go ahead.
Or I guess that's open to, because this is a discussion. So what would be valuable to you to kind of critique organizations that are offering this?
For me, it would be, his history of experience doing it. Basically a proven history, track record of that kind of thing, of training that has shown positive results, collaboration with towns and cities and such.
And from Chris, I think I want to add something I think I heard you say, which was a plan of action, right? So you go to this, you attend it, and then what are the next steps? So I guess, do they help you generate a plan? I think that would be my question. If we could kind of suss that out, that might be helpful as well. John, does that seem helpful?
Yeah, I have the information I need to at least put this in the budget.
Yeah, so as far as the budgeting, I think you guys have some information on what we would like as far as possible trainings, but the biggest issue right now is allocating estimated amount, and which I think we've decided upon. Does anyone else have any more questions? So Melissa, how is this all going to play out right now? One final recap.
So I will be putting the 20,000 in travel and training under the administrator and assembly budget. John and I will be, looking to present a balanced budget, which will be coming your way tomorrow.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Does anyone else have any final input on this item? Okay, so we're going to close this item and move on to persons to be heard. We're now at the persons to be heard for participation on any item on or off the agenda. not to exceed 3 minutes. Does anyone have any comments? Dr. Ween?
Good evening, Dr. Richard Ween. One thing I do have to say about the last item is that it says it'll take possibly 2 staff members, and you have to factor in travel time plus days lost, loss of productivity. And what happens is, so that's 12 days. And so you multiply that by 2, that's 24. So that's at minimum 24 lost days, and I presume they'll be paid. So to me, I like to suss out all of the costs as it relates to things. And it's not just the $20,000 for this particular idea, but that's just me. I just like little details. I'm kind of picky, but that also means that I keep my temperature at my house at 60 degrees. It's pretty freaking cold, but I don't mind wearing fleece and a sweater. And if you look at $300 as the average cost, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'm telling you, I don't have electric heat, and it's way over $300. So God bless the individuals whose average home is that cost. The bottom line is, when you look at utilities, it's lin chi, and that is a Chinese word which means death by 1,000 cuts. And actually in China, they actually killed people by 1,000 cuts. And utilities happens to be one of those cuts. You can't take utilities out of context, because everything within our society is going up. And as far as that graph that you saw there with wages, those aren't real wages, because they may be going up because of some inflationary increase. But if you look at the core CPI and everything, it's just grabbing a heck of a lot more than their wage. And so, you need to do these things for utilities in order to make them work. That is one of the 3 things that people require from the city. That is the obligation. But the question becomes, if you look at this, if you look at the utility presentation, there are so many questions and so many unknowns, and we don't know about construction costs, and we don't know what's the compactor is going to cost, and we don't know what this is, and we don't know what that is. So what's happening is we are getting this highly condensed snapshot, and you're charging people for this snapshot when you know darn well, with a $31 trillion national debt and everything else that's coming that I mentioned at the beginning, where people are just not having any money, credit cards, everything is hitting them at once. And so the question you have to ask with utilities is, where are we really going, and who are we doing this for? So not to expand it. Thank you.
Anyone else for persons to be heard? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.